3rd. Somebody would want to grab that door, please shut it. Thank you. Friday, April 3rd, 2026. Good Friday. Everybody's got some great Easter plans if that's what you celebrate. We are going to spend most of our morning on an act relating to prohibiting the use and sale of the herbicide paraquat. We're gonna break it up into 2 sections. We also have some folks that couldn't make it, so we'll get them in next week. Before we get to that, just for committee's information, I went on a high level view of S323, our miscellaneous bill to House Agriculture yesterday afternoon. They'd already gone through the bill. I think it went very well. They had some great interest in the sections that didn't make our bill, from the donation of foods to the solar siting. So we'll see how that ends up. But I thought it went very well. Great questions asked, and it was helpful that they had been through the bill already and could kind of see what we're doing. But we were able to give them some insight as far as what our thinking was, which was great. So, other than that, any questions before we start from any of the committee? Okay. So, we have a long list of testifiers. And I think because the House has unless there's any objections, the House has a caucus of the whole. Maybe and get them back to where they need to be. I'll probably bring the House members up first if everybody's good with that.
One House member is on his way in. He'll be here in 15 minutes.
Okay.
That's Representative Burke.
Okay. Would you rather we wait for that House member, Representative Nelson, or would you want us to start with someone else?
I'd start with the presenter of the bill.
Okay. Why don't we do that?
Not to throw anybody.
And by the way, remiss the last time I was in, I brought my duties and,
Well,
the paint pennants to
well,
the chamber.
there is a reason why you made it in the door.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that. There. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess then the official act has been made. Representative John O'Brien, reporter of the bill. Well. Yes, you're very welcome. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, for the record, Representative John O'Brien, I serve on the House Committee on Agriculture, Food Resiliency and Forestry, and I was the reporter of this bill on House. H 739. It's an act relating to prohibiting the use and sale of the herbicide paraquat. So I thought I would just give that high-level overview first,
Yeah,
and then
whatever.
we'll go through the bill, which is
However you'd like to do.
pretty straightforward. I started out the House just talking about what is paraquat. So it's actually really old, as far as recognized in the scientific world. It was 1882. It was synthesized by scientists in Germany. That's a long time ago. But it wasn't until the mid-50s that it was recognized for having these qualities as an herbicide. It was started to, it began to be manufactured as herbicide by the imperial chemical industries. So used as we sort of know it from the mid-50s. Now, what paraquat is not, it's not Agent Orange. It's got nothing to do with glyphosate or Roundup. It's not a neonicotinoid. It's its own family of herbicide. And even its name, paraquat, is from the parapositions of quaternary nitrogen. So I don't know if any of us are scientists here or not, but it has been the structure of the ions in it. You'll often see that, with these different families of herbicides or pesticides that like Roundup, glyphosate, I think is a very specific sort of chemical elected and then go. So while this bill is about banning paraquat, I thought we should talk first about what it does really well. So it's used principally in two different ways. It's considered a broad spectrum, non-selective contact herbicide. So in our agricultural world, it's used as a pre-emergent killer of weeds and things. So in the modern day orchards, you know, they moved away from the sort of big trees that are really tall and you need to use ladders to get those apples. For example, now they're stems very close together in rows that are accessible both to either you pick, you know, all of us consumers or even to professional pickers. So there's more fruit per tree, more fruit per acre. They go online a lot faster. Like you plant the stem and you get fruit, you know, within like 3 to 5 years. They make a lot of fruit, so it makes more money for the orchards. So, but when at the nursery stage, you have these long lines of saplings, and there's competition from weeds. So paraquat, if it's sprayed at the base of these, the genius of it is that it kills like the leafy greens that are there, but it doesn't get into the stem of the tree itself. So all the vegetation around the footing of these, all the competition, it's not only competition with, you know, nutrients, but it's competition with that sort of weeds. If they get going, they draw in rodents who will eventually grow the trees, and things like root borer, these moths who lay larvae who go in for the into the tree and kill everything. So it's really good at that. And the alternatives like Roundup actually get into the anatomy of the tree and do damage. It can either kill it or just slow its growth down so that it doesn't get producing fruit at the same speed that you'd like if you're an orchardist. So that's one way to use. Mostly that's the way to use Vermont. We had both Representative Burke, West Beagle First, an even bigger bill serve from Champlain Orchards giving, and he still uses it. That was very effective. The other way to use is a desiccant. So if you have a crop,
I'm sorry,
desiccant, it's called. It essentially kills all living vegetation on top of the ground. So if you have a crop that you want to kill the tops and potentially get at the root crop, say peanuts, for example. In places they just spray it, it kills the tops. So potatoes be another one. Cotton is another one. Soybeans, that's used a couple times in Vermont. That's the only example we found of it being used as desiccant. That's very effective at that. But
Now we have a farmer that's talking about strawberries as well. They have used it to keep to kill the sucker plants that come off of that. They got testified. Had you heard any of that testimony when you guys were
we
there?
haven't, but that would be more that sort of pre-emergent, probably weed control.
Okay.
Yeah. Not as a deputy, you wouldn't want to kill your strawberry crop.
No, that's right.
But in parts of the US, it's used that way, extensively. So, as a tool in the toolbox, it's considered important in certain agricultural work. So now, why would we want to ban this? So that is, you know, these certain qualities almost no other herbicide has. So first of all, it's highly toxic. It's like the poster child of the most toxic, you know, substance you can imagine. So just if you accidentally ingested a tablespoon of this, you would die. Like immediately, no antidote. And it little bits of it, like if you touch it, if you breathe it in, it attacks the membranes in your body. So if your lungs, it gets to your brain and then permanent damage, and they'll potentially lead to death or some lethal effects that permanently impair you. And that's probably why it's run into a lot of problems in a lot of countries. Just because if you're not a certified applicator, it's just dangerous to have out there. But probably the bigger push is it's now linked to Parkinson's disease, which, after Alzheimer's is the second, fastest growing, what's it called, instead of neurodegenerative diseases. So, and how do people get it? How do they get Parkinson's from paraquat? Up until 1978, paraquat could be used by any of us. It wasn't restricted use. That's when it became restricted use. So most of us in this room at some point, we probably were exposed to it because it was used on sports fields. It was used at home. It was used on golf courses, all these places. So there was certainly a lot of access, just your average American citizen. And now with further research, originally it was thought that that paraquat just binds to soil and it doesn't volatilize, just get out there. But now with more and more research is showing that it actually does, either break down, or it gets in the air, it gets in the water, or even as it breaks down, it moves up from 2 to 7 miles. So all of a sudden you're talking, you have an orchard and a school is 2 miles away. Those kids may be exposed to it.
So just so I'm clear, so it's airborne as well as what you're
It
saying?
can be, yeah. Or get on water.
Depend on how it's applied.
Yeah, and all those conditions that go with application. Yeah.
So it's a very persistent agent, as we would say there.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And then even when it binds with the soil, there's a half-life to it for a long time. So if that soil gets disturbed or moved or it breaks down. And Parkinson's is, it's pretty amazing now. A doctor, neurologist at UVM Medical School came in and said it generally it's people of about our age. So if you told me I get Parkinson's at the end of my life, all my way journey is disrupted, and I began medical treatment. So he said you start adding this up, it's about $1 million per case for Parkinson's. So it's like by 2037, it's going to cost the US $80 billion. So there's definitely a bill in Parkinson's. So they can potentially cause Parkinson's. You should pay attention to this.
I'm gonna give you a chance to right or wrong here. You said that paraquat was very old chemical.
Yeah.
Well, I see it was registered in the United States in 1964. That was the year I was born.
Yeah.
So I give you that chance. That's all.
We've all been now. I think because of its toxicity and Parkinson's, now it's been banned in over 70 countries. It started in Sweden and then the EU, and then even places like the three of those. It's Syngenta, this big agricultural basic that has plans for making paraquat in the UK, in Switzerland, and in China. All those countries have banned it for use, but it's still made there and sold in Vermont. But even amazing, the countries like Gambia, Guinea, Mauritania, Mozambique, Niger, Togo, Chad, they've all banned it. So it's quite remarkable that we're following up those countries as far as considering the safety of our citizens. So in 2021, the EPA banned it from golf courses, residential lawn use, and school recreational areas, just because of that exposure. They kept it as a restricted use pesticide for agriculture. Where they considered it, with certified aggregators and in certain restricted use, they considered it safe. But now, even breaking news wise, last October, I think it was, the EPA sent out a memo saying based on the new evidence that's coming up about its volatilization, they want to revisit those safety standards and things. So they didn't say no more use of it, but they said we're going to revisit this and report probably this year on what we consider in those new findings. And then on the maker side of it, Syngenta, a couple of years ago, pulled their license from Canada. They don't sell it in Canada anymore. And now they just sent out a memo when we were actually taking testimony on this, sent out a memo that they're going to list US. So there are lots of other, maybe a couple dozen other chemical companies that will still make it, but Syngenta was the real elephant in making it. And we think it's the pressures from lawsuits that are pushing them to hold us, because they're $180 million of settlement so far, where the settlements have been essentially they've been settled out of court saying Syngenta's not to blame for Parkinson's, but they're still paying out a lot of money just to settle. And I think there's 6,500 cases still out there. So you're probably looking at that saying, boy, the bottom line looks awfully bad here. Let's just stop making this. And given that 70 countries around the world already abandoned, they'll probably move on to something else in years. So that's where we get to with the bills. The headline from the bill in our committee was that we voted it out 8-0-0. So it was unanimous. The bill itself starts with findings. Once the stuff I've gone over. Section 2 is about definitions, which just tries to drill through around all different types of paraquat, so that there won't be some loophole that you can still sell paraquat under some other like molecular variation. Going forward, the secretary will have to get written permission from the Secretary of Ag if you want to use it. And then it phases out to a ban in 3.5 years, by December 1st, 2030. There'll be a ban on it. We're hoping, potentially by then, it may be done. The EPA may say we're not going to this already, but at least it gives us a target rate. And most important for our farmers, our orchardists, it gives the farmers a target date to figure out alternatives. And that's the last part of it is with the Agricultural Innovation Board. They're going to spearhead looking into alternatives to it, because there are other herbicides and their management practices potentially you could use that maybe it won't be as easy in some ways, but much safer, and it would just be fun in some ways. One less very dangerous tool in the toolbox.
Did you take any testimony on any other chemicals that are available at this point?
We did hear from Dr. Gary Bradshaw from UVM Horticultural Park. Said that there are some alternatives. They just they all have issues. One works very well on vegetation, but it causes cankers and nursery stuff. And so you have a certain amount of loss there. Roundup, same thing. You potentially get, if you're not super careful, will get into the trunk, the sapling, and do damage. There pretty much something trees. And then in certain countries, are figuring out more mechanical things too, whether it's mulching or chips or more mowing, that sort of thing. So I was looking at food demand, and interesting that the 4 biggest producers of apples in the world: China, Turkey, US, Poland. And Poland's a place that has an almost identical climate here. They clearly make a lot of apples, produce lots of apples. So how they potentially have adapted to a post-paraquat world might be worthwhile. They have our AIB and say UVM Extension or Cornell or whoever coordinate.
I'm sure they'd like to make a trip over.
Yeah, exactly. That Bowman's nice, but I heard it.
Committee might have those.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so. And then Representative Berg was the one who pointed out, let's not, have, the Band-Aid take place, you know, July 1st is so often used. I mean, it's like, this is right in the middle of the growing season, so that's why we push the Band-Aid have to go. But the effective date as far as, when the clock will start ticking would be July 1st, 2026.
good, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So John, I'm just curious, since it appears that it's been well known for quite a long time, why are we doing it now? What's the problem we're trying to solve? Have there been incidents in Vermont with respect to either ingestion from Vermonters and then dire results? Or I'm just trying to figure out why we're taking this up this year.
Yeah, I don't know the history of, you know, if there've been in previous sessions.
I don't recall it ever being.
Yeah, I mean, I know we did a lot of work on neonics.
Sure did.
And so maybe, that got the headlines, but I think this is ever since the EU banned it, and, you know, but I think starting with Sweden in like 2004, 2004, something like that.
Okay.
I think it's been on the radar certainly of the health community and environmental groups and organic farmers, for example, is not allowed, you know, in organic farming use. That, you know, because it's almost not used here at all too. I don't think there was much pressure to ban it. It's like Terry Bradshaw, the horse farm said they don't use it there because they're too close to.
Yeah. I just didn't know if there was an event that happened that.
Yeah, not that I know, except Parkinson's certainly. I mean, the UVM Medical has been doing a lot of research on
Yeah.
Parkinson's, so I think there's a recognition there that
Yeah.
if you follow the smoking guy.
But if it hasn't, I think the argument's going to be in this committee, without hearing all the testimony, because we are very good at that. We are hearing great sides of it. But it's gonna go down the lines of where, Senator Collmore's asking. You can do all the studies that you want, but where is Vermont being the factor in that it is creating Parkinson's further? Where's that tie? Where's that link? And why are we doing it now? So I think that will be where it is. And it's also in this thing here, which is, goes kind of against how we feel in this committee about taking testimony and looking at all sides of it, but it's, okay. What's next after this? We have neonics. We have paraquats. What comes next? So when you start talking about tools and toolbox, you start stripping tools out. And I think that's where the wrestle is going to be. As far as where is this, you know, yeah, we get it. We get it, it's dangerous. We see the ties. We see all of that stuff. But we're here to protect farmers as best that we can. And if they're using it in a safe and reliable way, we get the harms from it. I think that you can make an argument on every chemical that's being used on farms today that it's very, very dangerous. That they're bad stuff. And we wish that there was a world that wasn't there, but we have to feed people. And so I think that's where the rub will come. That will be what we'll be looking at very intently. And again, we have a lot more testimony to go.
And I'm just curious, you mentioned Syngenta's announced they're not going to sell it in the US. When do they say that's going to happen?
I think at the end of this year, they're
Oh.
stopping. So essentially what's out there right now is to be sold or used, but then the shelves are going to be there for Syngenta's point of view.
As far as their,
Exactly.
Start looking.
yeah, you had mentioned that there was a study in October that came out that
Everyone's known this has been terribly dangerous for a long time, and just learned that it's probably more dangerous than we even knew. And so even using it as carefully as possible is impossible to make it not dangerous. Even if nothing's happened for a month, or even if nothing's happened on, well, probably something happened in perhaps 78 was when it was banned, but it makes sense just from that standpoint. This is just dangerous. Everything uses it. But that's just what I understood was we learned that this is probably a lot more dangerous.
I think that's the consensus. And I thought that, you know, the two of the most compelling witnesses with one I mean, definitely get Terry Bradshaw, Dr. Terry Bradshaw, there was, let's see, Professor Mortensen was an emeritus professor in agroecology at UNH Durham. Had some really interesting things, and then, right, this Dr. James Boyd, a neurologist at UVM Larner School of Medicine, they were really, that's as far as that tie
Yep,
between.
okay. And this bill bans not just sale, but use of.
Right.
So if Syngenta decides, you said the end of the year, December 31st, the bill doesn't take effect till November 1st. It's almost
In
like,
3 years, right, yeah,
oh, in 3 years.
yeah, there's a 3 year, so
Okay.
that gives the
All right.
abortionist
Okay.
time to figure out alternatives.
With all due respect, I think we're gonna move on.
Yeah.
We got a lot of witnesses here that we need to get
Yeah.
through. Appreciate it. Very great.
Yeah, you did a great job.
Good job going down through, and, we appreciate it very much, Rebel Brian.
And my colleagues in our committee,
Yeah.
have really good stuff to say too.
Okay, so I think now we're going to, move to Representative, Greg, Burt.
You need more ag, Greg?
I don't, but I'll be.
Well, the floor is yours, sir.
Greg Bird, representing Cabot on Beecham. Actually didn't get the memo of what I was going to talk about, so you might talk about what bill that I presented.
I'm talking about more Paraquat.
We're going just Paraquat.
Yeah, we're just talking about the Paraquat as far as, an apple producer and where your use would be. And,
Good, I got more expertise on that.
okay, sounds good.
So I did vote yes, in committee on that, bill, so we voted it out. But it was reluctant. I'm definitely grateful that there's a carve out for tree growers in it. I talked to Chair Durfee about maybe making a modification. I've proposed bringing an amendment, which is met with some thoughts that it might not go anywhere in our committee, but the study group that's put together in the bill, I feel like if they can't come back with a viable answer for our orchardists, then there ought to be an extension until they do come back with a viable answer for using something besides Paraquat.
I think I'd be very interested in hearing about how you use it and what you would use in place of it.
So I use Paraquat myself on our orchard. We use it for the youngest trees that are 1 to 3 years old because Roundup is known to do damage to those trees if you use Roundup.
Roundup gets into the root system and changes the way those trees think and the way that they do, and then that will forever stay. And Paraquat does not do that.
Correct, yeah. Paraquat, if it hits a blade of grass, wherever it contacts the blade of grass, dies. And you'll see that the other part of the blade of grass stays green. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'd like you to do is take from where you purchase it, from the time, how you mix it, how you apply it, and then you're telling us the effect, but run us through you buying it,
Yep.
prepping it, how you applicate it, and what you do if there's any residue left over, what happens with that? If you don't mind.
yeah. So I purchase most of my chemicals from Nutrient Ag, which is located in a couple different places in Vermont. I can get most of mine out of Madison. You can only apply Paraquat if you have a license through the state of Vermont to do so. I'm a private applicator. We have those delivered to our farm. We,
Size.
ours come in a 2.5 gallon jug. I actually have not purchased, this is how little I use of it, but I have not purchased they have some newer style container that I'm not aware of actually using it myself. I haven't purchased it. That I can't speak to, but I have the older style, which is just a regular jug with a steel top, old seal. You can use it. You mix it at, I think 1 pint per acre is the suggested amount to apply. And we use a small tank that we purchased from Tractor Supply mounted on a 4-wheeler with a hand lock, because then we can put it on very accurately. If it's just mounted on a bar on a tractor, it might you might contact foliage or hit the trunk a little harder, even with paraquat. So we're very, very careful with how we apply it, so that we're not hitting the tree itself. So when we have a lot, you know, we're an establishing orchard, right? We're trying to get our acreage up. So you start with trees that are a year old that you put in the ground, and from 1 to 3 years old. If you're using Roundup, there's a good chance you're going to lose those trees. It's costly to establish 1 acre of trees. I can tell you that right now. So you don't want to take risks. And there are other chemicals out there. Did I answer enough on?
Yeah,
I can,
yeah.
and when we have a partial tank left, you know, I can go.
I do want to talk about that. I
I can
want to
keep
talk
going.
about where the residual goes. What do you do?
Right, so that tank is only used for herbicides, okay, so. If there's a partial tank left, we just leave it in there until the next time we apply.
So if there's just a little bit, you dilution's the solution, you flush it out with water and just
Flush it out, yes, triple rinse, if you have the jugs that are left over, you always triple rinse them.
And where's that? Just out of
Punch a hole in the side of the jug so it can't be used for anything else. And then I like to hold those jugs and take care of them when they have in the spring at our recycling center to make sure that they're going to the right place.
Now, storage, you have children.
Yes.
How do you make sure that that never gets messed with? Because
Yes, yeah, so lock it up. Lock it up, put it in its own spot that can be locked.
When you're applying it, Greg, do you wear gloves and a mask or some sort of protective clothing?
Yeah, so I mean, on the label, it says, oh, you're supposed to wear it. But yes, we're wearing gloves, we're wearing respirators. I do the application of paraquat.
Okay.
Roundup can be applied by folks without a license to do stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so moving through the process now, it's applied, it's all of that. Is it effective?
If it weren't effective. It is, so the difference, it really is just for those young trees.
Effective to what you would use in place of.
It's just that one instance that we use it. It's not as good as Roundup in terms of it's Roundup will, because it goes down into the roots and kills the whole plant. You get a lot longer period of time before the grass comes back. Paraquat comes back a lot. The grass comes back a lot quicker.
that's what I was just gonna ask, how quick this, how's its residual effect?
It's like half the amount of, you have to, if you want to have the same effect as Roundup, you have to apply it twice as often,
How many times you,
2 to 3 times for Paraquat, and Roundup's once or twice.
In a season?
I tend to, I mean, every grower's gonna do something different, but we whack a little bit too on our young trees where, you know, the weeds that just are, that make it up. So my dad actually planted Roundup Ready alfalfa years ago in the field where we planted some new trees, and so Roundup doesn't kill the Roundup Ready alfalfa, and but Paraquat does, but it just kind of knocks it backward. And then we do some weed binding too, so there's a lot of, you know, that every grower is going to have a different situation, but as you guys talked about, it's a critical tool right now for.
so small area, once you apply it, how you make sure like kids don't go running out through, you
You don't let anybody in. There's a restricted entry interval. I believe it's 12 hours on Paraquat.
okay, how far apart are your saplings? When you plant,
They are 5 feet apart.
and you go from what, just around the sapling or a whole?
You do it. It's basically about this wide on either side of the trunk. So totally, you're looking at this wide.
A tree grid.
Trees are in the center of it. You go down one side spraying, you come back on the other. It's just one continuous band. That's
Just by the tree, not between it.
so in between in the alleyway, like my current new planting is 14 feet between rows, 5 feet between trees. So if this is how much is sprayed, I guess you're looking at about 11 feet of grass that's untouched in between.
How's the heaviest makeup of that chemical when it's mixed? Is it a thicker mixture or is it like water? Is it more apt to drift? Is it something that should have a drift additive in there so it doesn't drift, or it doesn't want to drift? What's the what's that? You know, some chemicals are heavier than others, some are water type, some are thicker. What's that makeup of
So
that?
we're mixing, you know, half a pint in with 15 gallons of water.
Okay,
So
so
it looks a lot like water, except that it has a greenish tinge to it, which they do on purpose, so you know it's not water.
okay,
Um, yeah, and it's so in terms of drifting, you know, we don't want it to drift at all, because if it drifts, it's gonna burn foliage on our young trees or burn, you know, get on the trunk. So, we can adjust the droplet size really easily on our spray wand so that you can make bigger droplets that are less likely to drift. We do it early in the morning before the wind picks up. As soon as the wind does pick up, we are done. So the nature of how we use it forces us to use it in a way that actually manages drift.
The way that you're talking is, you're saying you actually do the application. I know it was said that there are, individuals that actually hire people to do the application.
Yep.
And then what precipitated you to have you do the application instead of hiring someone?
Well, that way I don't have to have somebody else go out and take the test and get the license for it. I just never attempted to
So
do
there's a
that.
certification, I would suspect that, okay.
I do have a couple of guys that work for me from Jamaica, but the only thing that they apply is ground.
so when you're using this chemical, this isn't about touchy feely or anything like that. That's not what we're after. Are you very mindful about as dangerous as it is? I mean, does it really make you say, boy, just gotta be careful here?
I feel that way with every chemical that I apply. I mean, and sure, paraquat, knowing that it is more, I mean, it only takes a tiny bit of paraquat, you know, ingested, right? So I guess by the nature of knowing that it's more acutely toxic, you handle it a little bit more carefully, that's for sure. But I handle all of them extremely carefully. We always wear respirators, always wearing gloves. When I say we, I mean on the Roundup, and we as growers. I apply we do foliar applications for diseases and bugs directly on trees. And I have a cab tractor for that, so I'm not getting doused out there when you're spraying upward onto trees. It's it doesn't take much. It's going to go through the tree and around to the other side. We do that when it's not windy either, because I don't. My chemical bill is over $20,000 a year. I'm looking at trying not to waste my money first of all, and make sure, and also that it's getting applied properly. If there's wind, it's not going to get where I want it to go. So it's useless to apply on a windy day.
So last question for me, for you, unless there's something else that you want to add. What would you use in this place?
I don't know fully the answer to that. We would be experimenting with it. I've heard of another chemical called glufosinate, I believe it's called. I've never used it before. I've heard that you have to be very careful with that one because it can create cankers on your trunks. Or the pictures that I've seen looks like places where I've seen before on my trunks, but probably due to other natural causes. But you obviously whatever practice I do, I'm trying to minimize any harm to trees. I'm trying to maximize their growth. I'm trying to maximize production. So if it's a chemical I've never used before, I'm going to be very careful. I might even go so far as to do something to guard the trunks of the trees, whether it's, and I don't even know what that looks like. It's probably going to double, triple, quadruple our labor costs first. And it might make it so that we're more apt to, if there's vegetation growing around the trunks, you're looking at more possibilities for tree borers, more possibility for diseases. It's just, when you've got something that you know that works, and you've been doing it for decades, it's really hard to want to stop using it. I mean, just looking at it purely, not trying to look at, I'm trying to decouple myself from the potential health effects to other people or to the people that work for me or myself. But just purely looking at it from a tool that we've been using for decades, it's going to be difficult to find something that works even closely to what that works.
Well, I think we've learned today, what I was hoping that you could tell us. And is there anything else that you want to tell us before we move on?
I mean, if you want to talk to me, I'm, my email's right there. So I've done a lot of research. I did a lot of research on why it was banned in other countries and what research has been done in the US myself, in addition to hearing all the testimony. So I have my thoughts. Like I said, I voted yes reluctantly because I was appreciative that we did a 4-year carve out for apple growers. So.
I guess that's my, thank you, Chair. I guess that's my, we did vote for to go on, and it was reluctantly, what's your thought process now that you see that there's a chance that may come to fruition?
Farmers have had to adapt to a lot of things over the years, and we'll find a way. I don't want to be causing health harms to anybody. We want to be the first people to make sure that we're growing something that's healthy and I want to have a farm that's viewed in our community as something that brings quality of life.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you are getting associated with chemicals that are seen as, hey, this might be causing Parkinson's disease. No, I want to make sure that we need data. We need to know that it's the cause of Parkinson's disease, not speculate that in my mind. But alongside that, I definitely, I'm always going to err on the side of making sure that we're doing something that's healthy for us, for our neighbors. So that's where the reluctance came in, but
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you, Representative Burt. Very valuable testimony. Really appreciate it. I don't be surprised if we ask it back in.
thank you.
We're gonna move to Representative Richard Nelson. Good morning, sir. The board.
Morning. For the record, Richard Nelson, representative, Orleans One Derby, dairy farmer. Pesticide license holder. Such as is Representative Burt. Paraquat. Banned in 70 other countries, you've heard that over and over again. Be mindful, those countries have a different labor system than the United States. A lot of them have an abundance of labor. Be mindful that those other countries have a different food system than the United States. The United States has the most abundant, cheapest food supply in the world. Okay, that goes without saying. You're still hearing about eggs and everyone's excited because egg prices have come down. And no one talks about why egg prices went up. It wasn't because of the farmer, it wasn't because of the cost of transportation or anything else, it was because of avian influenza. Shortened up the chicken supply, which shortened, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, you gotta have the chicken to get the egg. So, I get so mad when I hear people talking about the food price and you realize that the American farmer gets 6 cents of every food dollar out there. That study just came out, 6 cents. They'll let us make 6 cents. They get mad if we make a dime. So don't ever forget that. Senator Engel said earlier, what's next? I played this through my mind a lot. What's next? And there's a bill on our wall right now in our committee about what's next. Neonics to me was a big mistake because you had a product that was 100% safe for all vertebrates out there. And we put it on seed and we're only protecting 1 cubic inch around that seed. I testified before this committee on that 2 years ago. Paraquat, well, it's a different deal. It's not on our farm. I don't use it on our farm. I don't need to use it on our farm. I have other tools in my toolbox. Should Syngenta's pulling their license in the United States? By the way, Syngenta, if you don't know, is owned by ChemChina. Okay, they're not an American company anymore. They're owned by ChemChina. They've been selling Vermoxone for years and years and years in this country. Anyway, Syngenta's pulling their license. December 31st, 2026, there'll be no more Vermoxone on the market. The only Vermoxone to be left will be in sheds, such as Representative Bird's. The EPA is asking for a study on volatilization. That study is going to cost millions and millions of dollars to do, as all studies done, you know, to tell us whether our tools are safe or not. And I surmise, which probably shouldn't, that's maybe better than assuming, because we know what assume means. But I surmise that they don't want to put the money into it with all the other pressures. And I question whether the other 23 or 25 companies that had Paraquat as a product will put the money to do the study. There are 7 others that are registered in the state of Vermont to sell Paraquat. So it's going to be around for a few years. I'm thinking in 5 years, might not be. That's again, that's a calculated guess.
So you were a yes vote on your bill. And what do you think about that?
With the carve outs we put in and, making it by a special permit, which the Agency of Agriculture does a lot of special permits. I thought that it would work with the carve out for 4 years. I could see a longer carve out. That's up to, your folks in this committee. We took a lot of testimony. We heard from a lot of people. It was asked earlier of Representative O'Brien, what made us bring this forward. Perhaps it was somebody ringing a bell saying, you need to look at this. When this first showed up, I texted 2 of my chemical companies. By the way, only 1 chemical purveyor in the state of Vermont carries Paraquat. All the rest will not carry it. So that told me something. And then I texted two people that I consult with on herbicide. And I sent them out a message, and it was late at night, so I just sent them a text message, Paraquat. And about to the word, the next morning, I had 2 responses back. Don't be dumb. Use glyphosate or Roundup. They didn't know why I was asking about Paraquat, but that was the answer.
And who was that to? Who did you text?
I sent that to Matt Blodgett, who is a commercial weed sprayer, commercial license applicator from Maine. Also sells seed corn, sells chemicals. He's a drone pilot licensed. Growing potatoes, grows corn. vast amount of knowledge. And the other one was where I buy my chemicals here in the pond, cheap shade fertilizer up the swamp.
Yes.
So, and this, for any of the representatives, and I guess we're hearing that, and you mentioned that EPA is looking at, you mentioned it to study. Is there any headwinds that you're hearing from the feds and what direction that they're going?
None whatsoever. All, you know, the EPA grows slower than an alder tree. Now, the rings are tighter than a roll of toilet paper on an alder tree. That's about the way the EPA moves. You know, to be sure, you know, our bill stops its use as a desiccant. And we have very little use in the state of Vermont. One year they sold a lot of gallons, and we don't exactly know where. Now, if they dig into the records and if it was used by a commercial sprayer, we will know exactly where. The agency hasn't done it. We can push them to do it. Maybe you want them. It's your, you know, it's what you do down here in the Senate. So
Did you
been-
notice that little jab that he just took there? I mean, he tried to sneak it under the radar, but he took a little jab there.
I brought
Oh,
a
he
lot
brought
of
donuts. He
I brought a
brought
lot of
shot. You can shake that. That was a donut shot. If you want donuts, you're gonna take a shot.
So you know, we've banned its use of the desiccant. So you listen to the way that Representative Burt described using it. The volatilization of drift is really, really, really controlled. Really controlled. And, you know, versus being out there in your sprayer at 10 miles an hour with your booms 3 feet off the ground and putting on 10 gallons per acre. You know, 1 pint with 10 gallons of water per acre. It's pretty fine mist. You know, Bert is mixing up 30 gallon rate per acre. You know, it's 15-gallon tank. He's using half a pint. He's putting on a lot of material to put it down to the ground. They're using it using the best science, the best way they can. And you know, I hate to give the apple growers another carve out like you did with neonics. But they need one. Because they are charged with feeding the people of the United States with a safe, reasonably priced product. And labor is an issue in this country. Also, to be sure, you dig into and you do a little Google search on Paraguay, why it was banned in other countries, you will see on list chemical suicide. And that's a fact. Well, they don't have the Second Amendment rights that we do, so. But they had access to Paraguay. You all go home and you look in your cupboards, and if you live in your house long enough, you got a can of something under your sink that has skull and crossbones on it.
Yep.
If you drink Drano, you'll get the same effect. You know, so we all deal with dangerous chemicals. I think we did the right thing with the carve out. Could the carve out be longer? You know, that's something we can look at. If, you know, Representative Burt said, you know, they can't find an alternative, but I would bet Senator Ingalls in 5 years. Paraguay goes the way of the chemicals. Anyway, any other questions?
Yeah, so Richard, I'm curious, and I want the three of you to know, for me, your vote carries great weight, and the testimony does too. If you had trees, it's your dairy farm, but if you were in Greg's situation, would you use it?
I would,
Okay.
because that's that's the tool out there. Now, I wanna relay a story to you that 2 years ago, or, yeah, 2 years ago, late May, I'm mixing a tank of chemical on the farm, up on top of my sprayer. And, I got two pumps going, two different chemicals. Totally legal. I'm wearing my glasses, my hat, my gloves. Long sleeve shirt. I shut off one pump because I got the amount in there. And I take that hose out of my tank. It caught my other hose. Cause I was in a hurry. That hose lifted up in the air. And I was soaked with chemical. Now, my brother was 150 feet away, standing on the deck of the John Deere harvester with a pressure washer, washing it. And as I walked across the yard, peeling out of my clothes, he figured out what happened. He made like a shower. He totally showered me down, right to my boxers and just my boots. And I went home to change and showered again. That had been terrible. I might not have had a chance to grace you with my presence here.
Well, we would have missed the donuts.
And then after hearing about Paraquat, I'm gonna up my PPE game a lot.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thank you, Representative Nelson. I think it was very valuable and we appreciate it. And we probably will have some more questions for you sometime.
Yeah, we're available.
I want to keep the game going as far as with what we're doing, I'm gonna, as Charles Gray.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to you to.
Well, just a big shoes to follow, but let's see.
Well, we kept the best for last. Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah, tell us who you are and let go.
Thank you guys again for having me here today. I appreciate it. It was a little tricky coming over the lights. Wanted to listen to that. It did get snowing. That's stop. I'll read my testimony first and then we can have questions afterwards.
Yeah.
Morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Charlie Gray. I'm a strawberry farmer here in Vermont with 13 years of experience farming. Before returning to agriculture, I served in the United States Marine Corps, where I earned a degree in petroleum engineering. In that role and throughout my military service, I received extensive training in the safe handling, risk assessment, and management of hazardous materials. I learned firsthand how to evaluate real-world dangers, follow strict protocols, and use powerful substances responsibly while protecting people and the environment. That background is why I'm here today. I use paraquat, such as Vermoxone, as a contact burn down herbicide in my strawberry fields for quick weed cleanups in row middles, pre-plant bed preparation or renovation. It works fast on emerging green tissue without leaving soil residues that could harm the plants. In Vermont's cool and wet conditions, it helps me maintain clean fields and protect young strawberry plants when timing is effective. The federal requirements already in place for paraquat. Paraquat is a federally designated restricted use pesticide under EPA rules. It can only be mixed, loaded, applied, or handled by a certified applicator. Non-certified workers are not allowed to use it even under supervision. In addition, every certified applicator must complete an EPA-approved paraquat training program before using it. And that training must be taken every 3 years. The training covers the product's high toxicity, strict label requirements, including the closed system transfer where required, buffers for PPE, personal protective equipment, and the severe consequences of misuse. Keep my training certificate on file and follow all federal and state rules as the licensed applicator. Without paraquat, I would have to switch to other options like glyphosate, glufosinate, diquat, carbendazole, or non-chemical methods such as cultivation or planting. These alternatives are often much slower, more expensive, and require more labor or equipment, disturb the soil more, and risk damaging strawberry plants. On a smaller Vermont farm growing high-quality strawberries for direct market agritourism, this would raise my cost, hurt yields or berry quality, and make it harder to stay in business. One important point on risk and regulation. Even with these strict federal requirements, paraquat faces a far more
far more oversight than many other dangerous chemicals. A common example is household bleach, sodium hypochlorite, which has a high acute toxicity and can cause severe burns and harm, small accidental ingestion or splashes. Anyone can buy, use bleach with no license. There are many other unregulated or lightly regulated substances around farms and homes that pose serious risk if mishandled. Yet they face far less oversight than paraquat. I'm not suggesting that we ban bleach. I'm just saying we should be consistent and practical in our regulation. Targeted rules based on actual use patterns and proven need, combined with proper training and licensing, make more sense than a full ban on one tool that licensed farmers like myself use responsibly in very limited amounts. This bill already gives apple orchards a time-limited permits until 2030, along with required training and reporting. I respectfully ask the committee to offer similar flexibility for small fruit. At a minimum, please make sure the study on alternatives include practical, cost-effective help for berry growers, including possible cost share assistance. Vermont already has a strong pesticide oversight. With my background in hazardous material management, I take safety very seriously and follow all the rules as licensed applicator. Losing this tool without a workable placement would hit my farm hard without meaningful reducing of overall risk compared to the many unregulated hazards we live with every day. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions about my certain use of paraquat, my experience with alternatives, and how training and hazardous materials informs me on my approach to farm safety.
How many acres of strawberries?
7 to 10 acres of strawberries.
7 to 10 acres. So how do you use what are you killing on a strawberry, or how is that? Explain that to us.
So for us, our biggest problem is it's not necessary. There's 2 types of strawberries that we can grow. They're all the same plant, but there's different techniques. So the first technique is matted row, where we grow them in the dirt, and then we set the daughter plants to make more plants, and then we'll come through and we'll cut them down. And then our second application is our second technique is plastic culture, which is raised plastic beds, where there we can't cut the runners off, and you can't, but then also the runners suck from the mother plants, so that way then you'll have less fruit, less yield the next year, because it doesn't have the ability to take that energy, put it into the plant instead it's pushing into the side plants.
And you use both methods?
Yes,
when you grow.
I can't. We use both methods, but I do the best I can on the dirt side of it, the matted row, to use cutting knives and cut the runners off and set them, with machinery. So I don't use on that side of strawberries as much. That's only like a rescue situation if you get into the fall and it's too late to disturb the soil. Then coming with paraquat, because as I said, it stays where you spray it. So if with us, we use it in a shielded sprayer. So I think it's called Red Ball. They make these shielded sprayers. It's only like 12 inches wide by 2 feet long, and it's got 3 spray jets in it, and it's all shielded, like right down to I think it's like a 2-inch gap off the ground. So wherever we put paraquat, it stays right there. Paraquat breaks down with sunshine. So, and as paraquat breaks down, it gets less dangerous, as you would say. So when it's fully broken down, it's biologically inactive. So it no longer has the dangerous characteristics of it. So that's why we use shield sprayer along with we use a surfactant with it. So a spreader sticker. So that way,
what was it lastly?
it's a surfactant or a spreader sticker. That's what most people that use these very dangerous chemicals use, spreader stickers or surfactant. They're non-ionic surfactants is what they're actually called.
You gotta break that down to what that is.
This takes up.
Yeah, it causes it bonds with the herbicide, or pesticide, and then it bonds with wherever you spray it. So
It's
when
more apt to stay where you
stay exactly where you spray. So
How many gallons do you usually mix at a time?
I'm using 1 pint, similar to 1 pint of Vermont Zone per 25 gallons of water, and then with another pint of the surfactants.
So when you're doing 3 you obviously don't do the whole 7 acres at once.
No. So for us, it's mostly our biggest use for it is the row middles, where because we're on plastic culture, the other option for this is to use propane use flaming to burn off wherever you need to do.
That wouldn't work well.
No, because it smelled all the plastic. So it's, and then, I mean, propane is also a danger label. So it's in the things classified in the danger label are all dangerous. That's why I brought up bleach, because bleach is also in that danger label. It's a different category, but it still is in that same danger category. So all I see is that paraquat, yes, is a dangerous pesticide, but it also is a tool, and we are being highly regulated and taught how to use this tool. And if now we say, okay, we're just going to ban it, even though you've been taught and you have strict regulations on how to use it, you're still going to ban it. That really doesn't make sense to me. Rather than saying, okay, it's taught, we understand there's dangerous chemicals out there, and the dangerous chemicals should really be restricted, which it already heavily is. So it doesn't really seem like it's needed more.
So the time you apply it, shelf or breakdown point. So I apply it this early in the morning, sunny, nice and up.
It's so on the label, it's 4 days, re-entry period is 4 days or 48 hours. So yeah, we have 48 hours, 2 days. And then post harvest, and then it's a harvest interval of 21 days. So it has to be a full. I do not use it anywhere before pre-harvest. All of our applications are post-harvest. So it's we get done. The example is our early plastic culture berries. We'll get done picking. Let's say we get done picking around July 4th, right, on our earliest fields. We get done picking, I put signs out, say this field's closed. Then I'll use our shielded sprayer. I'll tuck it right up to the edge of the plants and then spray the middles. I can get any weeds because I don't put on any herbicides before we harvest. So this is my one chance to come in, clean up any row middles, get rid of any runners. And then immediately after that, I'll mow the tops of the plants off and then cover wherever we sprayed up with any of the material, the mowed off material, the strawberry plants.
But Charlie, especially farmers that are in specific product or community like in bars in themselves, they talk to one another. Do all strawberry growers use paraquat?
Yes, the majority of all strawberry growers paraquat. I'm part of the North American Strawberry Growers Association. We're a almost 50-year-old organization that binds all the strawberry growers in North America. I was just down in Georgia in January at the Southeast Regional Fruit Growers Association. We combined both the North American Strawberry Growers and the Southeast Regional together at a conference. And yes, majority of all, this is one of the only ways that we can eliminate the runners or the dogger plants and also keep our middles clean.
Any other states thinking of banning paraquat?
I don't know.
That. I would figure
But
that.
I know New Hampshire won't, because I mean they're
But that didn't
not
come
to
up
say
in the
Vermont is pro farmer, but New Hampshire a little more pro farmer than Vermont is.
But that didn't come up down in the comment.
No.
Nobody
No,
showed that as.
you get outside of New England, they're more pro conventional farming than they are pro organic farming, which is organic farming is where you start. This is how I don't believe that there should be a difference between an organic farm and a conventional farm. I believe that we all should start off as organic farmers, and then we get to a point where I'm growing really specialty crops that are very hard to grow in our state. And I want people to eat strawberries. I want people to eat raspberries. I want people to eat blueberries. But if these tools are outlawed to Vermonters, the fruit's just going to come in from somewhere else. And there's been a lot of changes coming down the pipe, and I'm sure if the Syngenta's stopping the label, someone else is going to pick it up. And if they're already seeing that paraquat is on the docket to get banned, I'm sure in research labs in these private chemical companies, they are probably already creating or trying to figure out creating chemicals to fix this or to replace that, fill that void.
Thank you, Mr. Thayer. I know you had a question
No,
too.
go ahead.
So Representative Nelson gave us an example and an image in my head that'll be a while getting out from running around boxes of fruits.
I saw that on the website.
But I wanted to ask you in all seriousness, have you ever had a kind of a bad outcome, or are you aware that any other strawberry growers have had kind of a bad outcome using paraquat?
Not that I know of. I mean, we understand the danger
Okay.
behind it, right? It's,
The scenario where Representative Nelson was, wouldn't be the same scenario that you would be in, because it's not gallons that you're mixing of chemical at a time where you're pumping in you're pumping.
yeah, it's all, and our requirement to even filling, it has to be a one-way water source too, so that way it never can get sucked back into the system or, you know, it comes out that way. And
Okay.
the same,
I didn't know if accidentally you,
you know, that's why, especially with the Paraguay, you're required, I think I have it right here. First. Farm rules, certified training, full PPE and with an enclosed shield sprayer, so it's like long sleeves, even acid protected gloves, and they recommend if you don't have a full face respirator to wear a regular respirator with then a face shield in front of it. So and this is all, I was gonna bring it today. I was gonna bring you guys some Roboxone labels so you can read them. Like they're 69 pages long.
We like strawberries.
And there's 10, you know,
Or the donuts.
there's over 10 crops labeled underneath the paraquat label of where it can be used. So it's one of those, you almost have to break it down crop by crop and be like, okay, it is, you know, let's say raspberries is a good example, because similar to apples, you have this space underneath your bramble bushes that you could try to plant the grass. I've seen some raspberry farmers plant the grass, but they still have that compete issue where we'll come in and take it over the plots where, you know, that would be a sprayer for Roboxone with a spreader sticker would stay right there and then would keep that area bare and raspberry plants. We don't use that because we use ground cloth. So it's good.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So obviously the rest of the nation is using Paraquat, so there's still a huge demand for it. We heard that one chemical company is gonna stop making it as of January. Where do you get yours, and have you talked to your chemical supplier that, do they believe that it will become an issue?
I'm not talking to my chemical supplier, and I get ours either out of Nutrigen, out of Lindenville, but mostly I get it out of Helena, which is the chemical company for New England. I get it out of Halifax.
What would you use instead?
I'm trying. I tried a little bit this summer. I've seen in Ohio and I've seen in Georgia this January they are trying to grow like oats or a winter coat crop in all the middles because they don't, you know, we do straw as our middles, but I tried this summer, but it's when you're on such a strict timeline to get these crops grown, produced and into the market, trying side quests, you know, I would love to. I mean, if I could only farm side quests, that would be great. But you know, the farm probably wouldn't make any money. And then, so I did try a little bit this summer of trying to grow oats in the center rows, so that way that can grow up. But that's going to take a couple seasons of trying to figure out the rate, the ratio, and the equipment that I need. So it's just for me. Paraquat is actually, if I didn't have it, then right now I'm able to keep strawberry plants in the ground for 3 years, which is in the organic side of it, they only keep it in a year because weeds are their problem and they take out their strawberry plants. So I'm able to keep strawberries in the ground 3 years on plasticulture and 4 to 5 years on matted row. That saves. If I didn't have Paraquat, I probably, because of the runner issue, I did send your secretary a video of, you know, later on, you guys can see it. And we had already plucked those runners off once, then I'd have to get rid of that field. So then I would have to be planting new every year, which that's new plastic, that's new drip tape, that's all this, that's new ground that then I'm chewing through faster than, because the strawberries are the ones that you only can be in that ground for 2 or 3 years. Before then you have to rotate out, and then you can't come back for 2 or 3 years. So it's this giant, it's this kind of puzzle piece of rotating your crops around so that you always have fresh ground to go into it. And that's also something, you know, we apply Paraquat, but after we get out of strawberries on that piece of ground, that ground might not see Paraquat for 4, 5, 6 years, 7 years again, until we come back in. So there's huge times for the shelf life or the half life to burn off and not be there anymore by the time we get back.
Okay, well, I think we've got what we need to get. for now, and I, hope that we can contact you if we have some more
For
questions.
sure, so.
Is there anything else before we, say goodbye with you that you'd want to tell us for right now?
Vermont farmers are having a really hard time. The vegetable and fruit side isn't as hard as the dairy side, right? We've lost more farms than I can even count the last 5 years. And I'm not saying it's due to regulation, but I'm not saying it's not. I just would like to pause on all regulation on farmers until a lot of us, I'm the youngest, I'm 38, and I'm the youngest compared to a lot of farmers. And just to pause, let us catch up to what, these regulations are coming in so fast. By the time you get done one season, I'm like, what I did last year, it's no longer even available. So now I have to move to another thing. And then especially when it's just us, right? If this was a nationwide ban of paraquat, that would make the playing board even. But when we're only our little state, we're banning it. I don't know if New York or Massachusetts or New Hampshire or any other states are, you go further south, I'm sure there's not these bans in place. And I, as I said, I don't think tools should be punished. I think malpractices should be regulated. I think tools should be available for all farmers. And you should be able to, then that farmer, he should know, like most and all farmers care about this land, especially in Vermont, where we have very little amount of farmland. You're a rock state with a few fields.
Fair enough.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you.
If you need anything, reach out.
Committee, I want to just stay here for just a while. Let's just get through these witnesses. I've got James Boyd on Zoom right now. So with you, as long as you guys can get this, let's get.
Another donut. I'll be able to stay like that.
Mr. Boyd, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm just getting over a little laryngitis. So if it seems like I'm having an audio fade, it's not the computer, it's actually me.
Well, welcome. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Just give me a moment here. So Chairman Ingalls and the committee, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Just to introduce myself, I'm a neurologist who specializes in Parkinson's disease. And I wanted to just be clear about what I'm able to talk about, what I'm not able to talk about. I'm certainly not a toxicologist. I'm not a farmer. I have no background in pesticide use in any way, shape, or form. But I am a Parkinson's specialist. I have cared for people with Parkinson's that are Vermonters for 21 years and have really made a career of caring for people with Parkinson's, and those are my outward biases. So importantly, it's, I've spent my entire career looking for ways to slow progress of this condition over time, to prevent people from getting it, to contain their symptoms as much as we can. And the reality is after decades of doing research, we don't have any way to stop this condition after it starts. We have no way to slow it. And that's really why the discussion of any way, shape, or form to prevent it is so important. So I think that most people are pretty familiar with Parkinson's. Whether they know.
Ask one question, sir.
Sure.
Is it caught or is it in your genes?
Oh, well, I could certainly give you a little. So it is, there are genetic predispositions to it, what we call susceptibility genes. It's a small portion of what causes Parkinson's disease. There's a larger proportion of it, which is genetic or environmental factors. And it is probably in most a combination where some people have a heavier contribution of a genetic predisposition. Very rare where somebody has such a strong predisposition that they need no exposures at all. We talk about the concept of susceptibility genes, so something which will put you at risk, but under the right environmental circumstances, you're more likely to get it than even a twin who has the same exact genetics. And then all of the different environmental things that we certainly can talk about. So it's a condition that happens mostly age-related, chronic progressive neurological disorder. It's what we call neurodegenerative, meaning there's a progressive loss of brain function. it's the second most common neurological condition that's a neurodegenerative disorder after Alzheimer's disease. Most people really recognize tremors, slow movements, walking changes, quiet speech, loss of balance as being sort of the hallmarks of it. But there's really a lot more to how people suffer from Parkinson's. About half of them get a progressive dementia and have visual hallucinations, paranoia, and other psychosis. They thrash and shout in their sleep because of the lack of paralysis when they dream, making it unsafe to be in the bed with them for their spouse. They lose bladder control. They have terrible constipation, dramatic blood pressure swings where they'll pass out if they stand up, and just as a collective, they gradually lose function and independence. They become more dependent on their family members, have less ability to get through their typical just day-to-day activities. And the unfortunate thing is we just don't have anything that can cure it. So we're really just trying to do our best to keep people functional. I think one of the things of context that I think is important, and I shared some slides. Do all of you have it on paper or otherwise? I'm happy to put slides up.
If you could put them on the screen, that would be great.
Absolutely, I'm happy to. And I think this part of the discussion is mostly really kind of emphasizing or focusing on the importance with respect to Vermont and why this is so relevant. And everything I'm discussing right here, I'll go through these quickly and I'll just give you them for reference, are not to do with paraquat. They're having to do with Parkinson's disease. In Vermont, we are in the top 10%, the top 10th percentile of all states with respect to mortality related to Parkinson's disease. And so you can see that we're in dark blue, and that is exceptionally higher than what the lowest 10% would be. And those are the ones that are seen in yellow there. This is the specific economic and prevalence burden for Vermont, which came from the Parkinson's Foundation research. So we estimate there's about 2,500 people with Parkinson's in 2024. The cost of their collective care, loss of wages, medical care, and non-medical care, about $140 million for that year. And what we do know is that there's an enormous amount of lost function. It's not necessarily shortened lifespan. It's much more about years of disability. And so this is just a slide from 2017 in a study that looked at essentially years lost, whether they're lost because you're disabled because of Parkinson's disease or they're lost because you've died earlier. Most of that, the majority, is living years disabled. And once again, Vermont is among the highest in the country. The numbers on the side here on the right are the number of lost years in a single calendar year per 100,000 people.
Doctor, is that part of that reason because our society in Vermont is 55 and older rather than 55 and younger, that we might see a larger upswing in Vermont compared to other states? Because you look at like Florida and Nevada, that has probably a lot larger, younger scale. And does that have any effect, I guess, my question?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for a lot of these, they're age adjusted. So they're adjusted for relative age. And so that's why there's these differences among states. That
Even
also
in the percentile, doctor, as far as where it is that because of our aging population in Vermont? Is that why we could be at a higher percentile because of our aging population compared to other states?
Yes, it's absolutely a contributor for sure.
Thank you.
One of the challenges, this is also from the same study, looking at relative trends. This is US wide in neurological disorders and the years of the lost years from it. And if you look, all of the others are trending downward, with the exception of a modest increase in multiple sclerosis and ALS, which is motor neuron disease. Parkinson's disease stands out from the rest, where it is actually increasing in each year that passes from 1990 to 2015.
And doctor, that's nationwide. We're
That's
talking.
correct.
nationwide.
That's nationwide. So,
South.
so our relative prevalence of Parkinson's is higher than the average state. So proportionally, there are states where it's less prevalent. So we would see a larger proportional increase if we were to correct that curve over time, that ours is increasing faster than the others. And then this is just a reference for you in terms of the other states which are currently looking at legislation for banning the use of paraquat for reference.
Thank you for that. Doctor, I have another question. Did you listen to most of the testimony, or have you been able to listen to that, or were you busy?
I was here and listening. I joined in probably about 25 minutes before.
Great. So listening to the way that it's being applied here in Vermont not by aerial, or it's very controlled, very doesn't seem like wind. It's gonna blow from where it's the wind's gonna carry it. The application's droplet, and its shelf life once it's on the plant is 48 hours. In this application, if we stick to protecting our farmers, because that's what we're here to do, is protect our farmers.
Right.
We know paraquat's bad, but again, like they say, it's a tool in the tool shed. Do you believe that will have an effect on our food system, because most of it's used post product in the strawberries, and on saplings that do not produce trees, or do not produce apples in the orchards?
Yeah, I do not think that it has a significant impact on the food system based on what I know about paraquat.
Right.
In terms of the application techniques, I think again I'll probably defer on that just because of my knowledge base, and I don't want to talk out of my my area of expertise about how that differs with respect to studies that we'll talk about and the relative risks associated with the spread of paraquat.
All right, thanks.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, doctor.
oh, go ahead, please.
No, you go ahead, please.
All right. Again, please feel free to interrupt along the way. So I think importantly, I think all of you know that Vermont's an old state, right? So when we're talking about risk of Parkinson's disease, there's an important piece of that it's not controversial that Parkinson's is age related, and that's the single highest risk factor. No one's going to contest that. That being said, again, that's one thing that we can't change the tide of age. Everyone's going to get older at the same pace. In terms of the other relative risk factor in terms of environmental or exposure risk, living rurally has been the second strongest correlation with respect to increased risk after age. And I'm not saying that living rurally and outside of a city in and of itself, but the suspicion, the expectation, and when there is an association with the relative amount of exposure of herbicides and pesticides, that really is the suspected major contributor to why rural living and proximity to agriculture is contributing to higher rates of Parkinson's. Just as a point of reference before we move on, we also have an enormous problem of healthcare access in Vermont, and this is even worse in neurology than other specialties, and particularly in Parkinson's disease. We have the rates of Parkinson's increasing at a rate where I can't hire Parkinson's specialists fast enough to get people in. We have, an over a year wait list
My goodness.
to have someone seen who is suspected to have a new diagnosis. So you hire someone and they have completely filled their practice, and you can't hire another person soon enough. So I think importantly, I'm by no stretch claiming that everybody who gets Parkinson's has some contribution of paraquat. That would be it would be false. It's absolutely sort of a combination of environmental factors and genetic predisposition. The tough part about the effect of paraquat is it's cumulative, and the risk of getting Parkinson's disease is not in the moment, it's decades later. So it's the individuals who are using it who are having the negative effects on the cells of their brain when there's a degree of exposure that it's an invisible risk until decades later. And the studies that we reference all show that it's not, unless they're exposed at a high amount with no protection in the moment, there isn't anything visible that would suggest that there's a problem. But each time there's an exposure, it accumulates and you progressively lose brain cells that are capable of producing dopamine. And I think there's very good evidence that paraquat causes Parkinson's, and we use it all the time in animal models. When we want to see if a medicine can be helpful or to save brain cells, we'll actually give the medicine and use paraquat to give an animal an equivalent of Parkinson's. So the actual mechanism of doing it is not in question. I think the connection, which is always needed to be made, is how does that apply in terms of the smaller exposures or the repetitive exposures that we see for people who are either involved in agriculture or who live in close proximity.
Doctor, that brings up a good question of, do we see, or in that field of Parkinson's, do you see a higher number of people that worked in agricultural businesses such as apple orchards, strawberry fields, anything that use paraquat more than the general public? Is there a surge of that occupation that stands out when you're doing your Parkinson study, that yes, we have a lot more that have done agriculture than just regular citizens?
There's two. So there's two things to mention. So I'll reference three important epidemiological studies specifically in individuals who were in agriculture occupationally, or in one of the more recent studies, just lived near, in proximity to agricultural region. So oldest of the studies was a large study called the Agricultural Health Study Cohort. It's a large group of thousands of people who were followed over time. It goes back many decades. And importantly, in that study, there was not any evidence of a correlation between an association of pesticide use and the prevalence of Parkinson's. Again, it's what we call a cohort study. That means that people have to report out whether or not they got Parkinson's and whether or not they had specific exposures that they can recall to a particular pesticide or pesticides in general. The specific challenge with interpreting that, and that's the one large epidemiological study which has not found a correlation with paraquat. The problem is over half of the people who were in that study never finished the study. They never reported out what happened later on. They dropped out of the study and were lost to follow-up. The challenge with that is there's actually a greater likelihood of people who are healthy and well staying in a study like that and continuing to report. So there's a bias in terms of the differential loss of follow-up of people who may or may not have a problem. And so it is relying heavily on this. It's a large study, but the downside is the dropout frequency, the loss of knowledge years and decades later, which is exactly the point at which we're worried about. That specific study group was looked at in a different way in something called the farming and movement evaluation. In that study, they actually took people who were already in that large group who got Parkinson's disease, examined them, confirmed that they did indeed have Parkinson's disease, and then they compared those to 350, there was 110 people with Parkinson's, 358 people who were also sort of confirmed to not have Parkinson's disease and were of a similar age, worked in similar types of agricultural work. And when they looked at the association of paraquat use, it increased the likelihood by 2.5 of getting Parkinson's if they had been exposed to paraquat specifically. It's an important point that when they looking at using protective equipment, so if somebody was using gloves, it was similar to if they did not have an exposure. If they did not use protective equipment, it didn't just increase by 2.5, it actually increased 4 times. So they were fourfold more likely to get Parkinson's in years to follow. So there clearly is there is a benefit of the protective equipment, as you mentioned earlier. And that was, that's relatively speaking, that's not a very large study looking at 110 people. Probably the most important study that came out was something called the California Parkinson's Environment and Gene Study. And that was looking at over decades. Fortunately, California has very tightly regulated pesticide reporting about where things have been spread. And what they did is they took the incidence of Parkinson's disease and the distribution geographically relative to that, and in addition, information about whether the people had been in agriculture themselves, whether or not they had just lived nearby a farm. And what they showed is that for that study, just being in proximity, not being actually individually involved in agriculture, increased your risk of Parkinson's disease with an odds ratio of 1.8 to 2.2, which is essentially a 100% increase in the likelihood of Parkinson's disease. For the people who were involved in agriculture and actually on the farms, their increase was an odds ratio of 2.2. But even if they were just in proximity, like living nearby, their increase was 1.8.
Doctor, did that tell how the paraquat was applied? Aerial droplets, like we've heard?
Again, I don't.
Airborne, it's going to spread, obviously, and maybe in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they didn't worry about. Even in the 90s, they might not have worried about it.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't have knowledge of how paraquat is spread. I don't know that paraquat was ever aerially spread, just because of the sort of immediate toxic effects of it. That there's been regulations around how it's been handled. Really for many years, for decades, it's been where it's had kind of a warning that you're supposed to be gloved, you're supposed to be preventing exposure in the person who's mixing and spreading. So I think protective equipment was being used back then, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to say, hey, if you used a protective equipment in that other study that dated back even further.
Doctor, any other chemicals that are on your guys' radar as far as paraquat might be paraquat causing?
Oh, meaning other herbicides or pesticides? I mean, certainly the two that are at the highest on the list are rotenone and paraquat. And in terms of Parkinson's specifically, there are other ones, but the level of evidence is nowhere near what it is for paraquat in terms of mechanistically its likelihood of causing Parkinson's at just a basic science and exposure level, both by animal models and as well by historical evidence with people. Those are really sort of top of the list. So there's not there, I think the tough part is, yes, there is lots of mixing of multiple exposures in terms of different herbicides and pesticides. Specifically, that study in California, they dissected out each and all of the different spread herbicides and pesticides, and when they corrected for eliminating all of the other ones, paraquat still had its own sort of relative risk that we're talking about. So the way that study was done and the detailed evidence that they had in terms of use and the overlaps allowed them to say that risk that I just mentioned is paraquat related.
Fair enough. Doctor, I just want to thank you on a personal note for what you're doing and the people that you're taking care of. I can't imagine what you see on a daily basis and the emotional toll that it must take on you to see the folks that you are in charge of and watch what happens with them. So thank you for what you do. Appreciate that very much.
I appreciate that.
We're gonna move on, and I hope that if we can call you back, we can make arrangements to have you available.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I think I would just, if I could just wrap up and say, one of the most important things is we can throw around numbers in terms of relative risk. The impact that Parkinson's has on somebody is really, it's devastating. And I think importantly, the people who we're trying to protect are the people who are using it, and their family members and their neighbors. So those are the people that are at greatest risk. I live next to a farm, but if I don't live next to a farm per se, or I'm at a distance, my risk is very low. It's actually the people I'm trying to make a voice to protect are really, in many cases, the people who are closest to the users. So I'm certainly not insensitive to the problems of taking tools away. It happens in medicine to us all the time, where a medicine gets taken off the market because there's a safety issue. And it's a 1 in 10,000 risk of having something catastrophic happen. And it is a bit of a hamstring in terms of your ability to do what you need to do in your day. I'm not discounting that, and I think it's really important. I'm not trying to restrict anything or take tools away from people, for sure, but also trying to recognize that the evidence it keeps mounting, and now we have 70 countries in the world that have banned paraquat, and for some reason we seem not to have gotten the recognition of the level of evidence to join the EU and China and multiple South American countries that have no longer allowed it to be used.
Thank you. Very good testimony. Very valuable to us.
Thanks.
Appreciate it very much. And committee, I just want to we got 2 more. Let's just get through them and then we'll just call it a day.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Right now as well. We have and Heather. Okay. Oh, is that Camp? Yes. Okay. Let's out of the 3 that we have, are they all on? Who's got a time constraint? We're gonna finish this up here. So we got Zach Hardy, we have Steve Doyle, we have Heather Darby.
I might just say Steve may cover some of the stuff I am. So in lieu of time, if I would give my time to Steve, I think that would be valuable. We probably have similar things to say.
Okay, anything, Heather, that you want to get out there by your own, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think just quickly, I was going to talk about where paraquat is being used in the state, and I will confirm probably what Steve is going to say is that it is used very little at this point. There are some rare, I would say, applications in no-till corn, and converting out of hay and a few other kind of minor uses in corn production and crop production, those systems. But more use, I would say, in orchards, and I'm sure Steve's going to touch on that. There is a lot of training that has to go on to use this product. I don't think its use is, the risks are overlooked in the ag community. And so I would also say that you have to be trained, you have to follow very specific guidelines. And I from all the folks I've talked to in the industry about this, that was very clear that people do know it's a high risk choice, both from, a safety perspective, and they are trained, especially for the use of something like paraquat. So I think it is a tool that people do use in certain cases, and it does have an important role in herbicide resistance management. But, it is not to downplay that it is highly toxic and requires extreme careful handling. And it is maybe one of the most strictly regulated herbicides in the US. So I don't think anybody, is downplaying that at all. So I will turn it over to Steve, as I'm sure he has more exact numbers on usage and requirements. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. I mean, it must be Christmas for us. We got you twice in 1 week, so
Yeah.
my goodness.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, it must be Easter, yeah.
Yeah, I'll let Steve
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
Steve, good to see you. Thank you for being patient. And, Zach, I'm gonna have you, back clean up after Steve. So hang with us, please. We're gonna get to you. Mr. Doyle, welcome, sir. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. For the record, Steve Dwinell, Director of the Division of Plant Industry, Agriculture, Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. And I sent a presentation, which I'd like to use, and I can either share my screen or Linda maybe can put it up and we can walk through it, however you'd like to do that.
Committee, do you want to pull it up on ours? You want Steve to share it? What do you want?
I'm gonna be here.
If you want,
Either way. Yeah.
on the screen?
Sure.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Steve, if Candy's worried, we'll do that.
Yeah, let me try it here, see if I can get it to work.
We'll do it.
Okay. Navigating here.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, so yeah, thank you again for the opportunity. Just going to go through some basic information about paraquat use in Vermont, and we can, ask. Probably best thing just ask questions as we go. So here are the topics I wanted to cover. The information I want to share is what products are registered, what information we have on use and sales, reports of incidents we've had, what risk reduction measures, which we've already heard some about, the EPA data call-in, which has already been discussed, and some of the regulatory reviews being done by EPA and California, which relate to all these things. My slides advancing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're doing fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have, these are the products that are currently registered in Vermont. Gramoxone is the most prevalent one, but we have these others, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are currently registered. We have 2 products that are in what we call a D2 registration. These are products that the companies have canceled their registration, no longer distributing them, but we keep them registered in case there are any in the channels of trade for folks to use. But from all the information we've gathered, the only product that's in use in Vermont that we can determine is the Gramoxone SL 3.0 Syngenta product. We get use information from so folks who are commercial applicators or non-commercial applicators, in other words, non-private applicators, are required to report their restricted use pesticide use during the year, and we collect that information. And so this is what was reported to us in 2020, from 2019 to 2024. There were only 2 instances where we had reports of use by commercial, non-commercial applicators, 18 gallons in 2020 and 250 gallons in 2022. That particular use appears to have been a kind of an experiment for use on drying down soybeans by one custom applicator, and they just did it the one time. Apparently they weren't so happy with how it turned out. But anyway, that was the use.
Did they say how that was applied? That 200?
I'm sorry.
You know how it was applied?
Yeah, that would have been a ground-based applicator. We don't have any aerial application in Vermont.
All right.
We have to, any aerial application is required to be permitted by us. We don't permit any aerial application. We have not permitted any aerial application of any pesticide, actually, since I've been here. We also get information from the, to distribute pesticide in Vermont, you have to be a licensed dealer, and they're required to keep records and report those to us. And so we went back the last several years to those records, and these are the reported sales from these dealers by county. So in 2023, there was 14.5 gallons reported sold. In 2024, 107.5 gallons, and in 2025, 125 reported gallons, the bulk being in Addison County, dealers supplying in Addison County.
It was what for Addison? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, Addison is probably related to apple orchards.
All right.
You'll
have a few there.
Yeah, and all of the material sold in these 3 years was the Gramoxone product. No other registered product was reported sold.
Steve, were you surprised that the Northeast Kingdom doesn't use any?
Well, there's a little bit of a potential that someone could have bought it in one county and transported it to another county and used it. So that's a possibility. This is what was reported to us. So I can't say there's no use in Franklin County, but and then of course just to clarify, private applicators do not have to report to us annually their use. They're required to maintain records, and the records have to be available on request, but they don't report that to us. So, okay. Talking about complaints or investigations, there have been no complaints or investigations involving Paraquat since 2016, which is as far back as Dave Huber can remember, and that we have records for. So, no incidents that were reported to us. You've heard a little bit about the risk reduction measures. So these are the risk reduction measures that were imposed by EPA over the last several years, primarily in 2017 and 2019. EPA revised the way Paraquat was allowed to be used. So the primary risk reduction measures are that only certified applicators can make an application. And just to clarify, there are some pesticides where a certified applicator can supervise the application by a non-certified person, but that doesn't apply to Paraquat. Only certified applicators can apply Paraquat. There's required additional training that you've heard about already. There's a label requirement. I'll get into it in a minute. That training has to be, there's a product-specific training that required on the label. It has to be completed once every 3 years, and it's primarily safety and handling. There are no uses for residential area or recreational areas, so no golf course use, no turf use. It's only for crops, crop production. There's increased PPE. I'll show you that in a minute. And then a requirement for what's called a closed transfer system. And I'll show you what that is. So here are the additional restrictions for personal protective equipment. Essentially, handlers and applicators, well, handlers have to wear the chemical resistant apron in addition to the other required PPE, which is gloves, long sleeve shirt, long pants, and shoes, and a respirator and a face shield. And then applicators have to also wear the face shield and the respirator, unless they're in a cab with a closed air system. And the whole
Steve, I just I'm noticing. I know the long sleeves that they have to wear. Does it matter if it's like cotton or the type of material that they have?
No, that's not specified. The there's no specification on this product anyway that they use a chemical resistant clothing other than the aprons.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Here's an example. Here is the closed transfer system that's required. Essentially what it is a cap that's sealed to the container and can't be removed, that has a key system. And so you can see on the second picture there's a slotted key that fits into a special adapter that goes onto the spray equipment, and the cap fits into that key. And then if it's once it's on there, the picture over on the right, you basically swivel the container, and it dispenses the material directly in the tank without contact. It's closed, a closed system, and it's required on anything less than 120 gallons. 120 gallons has a different set of requirements. But all the material that's sold in Vermont is in the 2.5 gallons, as far as we know. And that's, of course, intended to prevent any exposure during mixing and loading. So you've heard about the volatilization revised data. So in January 2024, Syngenta submitted additional information on the volatilization of paraquat. They're required to do that under FIFRA whenever a registrant becomes aware of new information that could affect the evaluation of the risk of a product. They're required to share that with EPA. So they did in 2024. This graphic, well, in October 2025, EPA then published a document reviewing that report and requiring some additional studies, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the document on the right, which I can submit separately if you'd like, so it's a little clearer, was prepared by our environmental toxicologist, our agrochemical toxicologist, Dr. Pam Breyer. And it compares the older reports of volatilization of paraquat with the new values. So in 2010, it was reported, or excuse me, 2019 at 0.0001 megapascals. And then in 2025, significantly higher at 0.4. It's still considered relatively or low volatility material. And then just for comparison, here's some of the other the volatilization, the vapor, it's called the vapor pressure values for materials that you may be familiar with, and including other herbicides. So you can see how it compares. But again, just to point out that even though it was higher than previously reported, it's still considered to be a low volatility material. So as a result of that additional information, EPA has initiated what they call a data call-in. And this comes from the EPA document. As far as I know, they haven't actually issued the formal data call, and they have to go through a process with the Office of Management and Budget to get it. There's an extensive process to do this. But they will be requiring additional studies on volatilization, and it appears the specific question they're looking at is the volatilization from plant material as opposed to soil. I think previous studies were done on soil, and this would be from volatilization from vegetative surfaces once it's been applied.
Has there been any studies to see if the residual amount of this chemical has reached the fruits of these plants?
During the initial registration, I haven't seen the studies, but that's part of the normal process of registering pesticide is to do residue studies on any crop for which it's applied, it's registered. This particular material does not translocate in the plant like glyphosate does. So it's a material that binds very strongly to the whatever surface it's applied to. It's an ionic material. And so it doesn't translocate in the plant. But residue studies exist for paraquat residues on whatever crop it's registered for, and there are tolerances that have been established, for the use on those crops. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, the data calling will be going on, and so as you've heard, in March of this year, Syngenta announced that their intention is to no longer continue sales of Gramoxone in the United States. They actually had did a little digging on this. They had a manufacturing plant in England actually, and they shut it down. So they're no longer manufacturing the material. Their intention is to continue to sell Gramoxone while supplies last until December 31st of this year. I actually asked the Syngenta representative if he knew how much material was left in the challenge trade, and he didn't have a good answer for that, or didn't have an answer. So he was looking into it. So, so there are obviously materials in the possession of applicators in Vermont currently. And they will continue to be able to buy it until December 31 of 2026, or Syngenta will continue to distribute it until December 31, 2026. There are, as you saw before from the materials that are registered in Vermont, there are a number of other companies that have registered products in Vermont and in other states. I talked to the product manager from EPA about this particular issue, and she told me there are 7 companies that are considered what are called technical registrants. In other words, they make the material and provide the material to formulators to make end-use products. And EPA is in active discussions with them on the data call-in issue. Because now that the Syngenta has withdrawn from the market, they're obviously not going to support the data call-in studies that are required. And so the other registrants are going to have to collaborate and provide that. So you've also heard about this. There is a requirement for specific Paraquat training. Currently, the only provider of that training is Syngenta, and you go to their website. It's about a half-hour training that you go through that you have to get 100%. There's a test you have to take. You got to get 100% on it, and you get a certificate. Syngenta provides it free of charge to anybody who wants to take it, and keeps a record, and those records are provided to state lead pesticide agencies so we can check compliance with the label requirement. So the open question is, since Syngenta is withdrawing from the market, who's going to maintain that training? Again, that's something EPA is talking to the 7 technical registrants about. And then lastly, these are current efforts that are underway, conducting additional evaluation of the Paraquat product. In addition to what EPA is doing with the data call-in for volatilization, California is involved in a very extensive process of reevaluating Paraquat from ecological and human health perspective, and all that information is on their website. And these studies here, these are linked to this slide. You can pull them up and take a look at. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing and see if anybody has any questions.
Anything, I know the agency, not officially online, has said that they don't have a position on this. I do believe that's what was said, but without trying to get you in the middle of that, what can you say about Paraquat?
I'd just echo the testimony that you've already heard from the applicators, that it's a very tightly controlled material. It's limited use, 100 gallons or so were sold the last few years. Very specialized uses for tree fruit orchards and for some vegetables, including strawberries.
What would be an what would be an emergency use to keep this a tool in the toolbox, but very, very limited use? What would be an absolute possible emergency use within the state of, okay, we need Paraquat?
nothing comes to mind, that would be, I mean, if we had introduced plant species that was causing havoc, and this was the only product that could control it, but I can't think of an example that would be an emergency use. I think the testimony you've heard from the industry, the agricultural industry, is that they have some very specific uses that are important in their production systems. And one of the aspects of the bill that was introduced is for the Agricultural Innovation Board to evaluate alternatives, which we will do with the, assuming the bill passes, we'll do with the University of Vermont, and look at what alternative materials. The one, I guess, the one advantage paraquat has is the fact that it doesn't translate into the plant, and so it's very direct, effective kill of the plant to which you apply. But the trade-off is it is extremely hazardous material, and there has been a history of incidents where people have been poisoned by it, and that's why all the restrictions are in place for its use, including the additional protective equipment and the closed transfer system.
And I
And
was
additional
just
training.
one question, even though it's probably been answered, and I just want to hear the words out of your mouth. Is there a residual in the soil, Steve, that will stay with this?
You can find the material in the soil, but it's bound very tightly and would not be biologically available or available to affect other plants. That's one of the characteristics that makes it useful in some situations. Is once it hits the soil, it's inactive. Now it will continue to be degraded bacteriologically, in the soil over time. And it doesn't, move into water, or it's not, isn't water soluble, so it's not going to get into water. The soil itself that has some of the molecules bound to it may move, and you might be able to find it in other locations. But again, it's going to be bound very tightly to the soil.
So this is strictly out of curiosity, Steve. And if you don't have the answer, I certainly understand. I'm just wondering where this is manufactured, the plant, the Syngenta plant.
Mm-hmm.
I have to imagine that the people that are making this have to really be careful. I mean, if we're talking about people that just sort of by accident on a farm might come in contact with it, I have to believe that the workers in the plant really have to take great precautions. Are you aware that they do, first of all, like if you ever been a tour of the plant, and secondly, have you ever heard about any incidents there?
I have not, but having worked in industries where I've been in manufacturing plants, safety precautions are extremely sophisticated, and since it was my understanding is this particular plant was in England, I'm sure they have very strict regulations. The one thing I'll say about the toxicity of the material, the major potential problem with it is if it's ingested. And then once it's ingested is where the most severe consequences are. There are some dermal contact issues in the eyes, obviously, but if you ingest it, that is when the serious problems occur. And there have been a bunch of comments about why other countries have banned it and the United States hasn't. The regulatory structures in those countries are way more lax than what we have in the U.S. We've got a very strict regulatory regime. And in those other countries, I think someone may have mentioned this, but there was a history of the material being used to commit suicide. That's a very grim way to do it, but that's what was happening in quite a few countries. And that was one of the reasons it's been banned, is because of in a lot of other countries, the access to pesticides is not controlled as it is in the United States. And I've been to a few of them, and you can literally walk into a store on the street and buy some pretty toxic materials without a license or training or anything. They just sell them. So, you know, that's one reason it's different in the United States than in other countries. And that's one of the reasons they banned it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, we're gonna move on, sir. Thank you for, as always, of what you bring to the table. Very great testimony. We know where to reach you, and I'm sure we're gonna be talking to you again.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Zach, we've got about 12 minutes. Thank you for your patience as well. And if we can't get out what we need with you, we're talking about it again this next coming week. So the floor is yours, sir.
Much appreciated, Chairman Ingalls and members of the committee. Really appreciate your time, and I've been listening to the other witnesses this morning, and I know it's been a lengthy discussion, so I appreciate you all being here and for the time this morning. My name is Zach Hardy. I am with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. I'm a senior state government relations manager for the foundation. And since 2000, we've become the world's largest nonprofit funder for Parkinson's research, with over $2.5 billion in research programs worldwide. Our goal is simple: to accelerate breakthroughs in diagnostics and treatments and ultimately find a cure for Parkinson's disease. Now, I know Dr. Boyd already went through a bit of what Parkinson's is and how it impacts folks. But I will add that over 1.2 million people are currently living with Parkinson's in the United States, with approximately 90,000 new folks diagnosed each year, making this disease the fastest growing neurological condition in our country and globally. And while the cause of Parkinson's has genetic components, as others have stated, environmental exposures play a significant role in disease risk. And among those environmental factors, the science linking the use of paraquat to a significantly increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease is some of the most concerning and well established. As we know throughout this morning, paraquat is a very highly toxic chemical that is used as an herbicide, and decades of research has now shown that people who work with or live near those areas where paraquat is applied have a higher risk of developing Parkinson's. Research has shown that individuals who handled paraquat were about twice as likely to develop the disease compared to those using other pesticides. It's not an abstract risk. It affects farmers, farm workers, and families in rural communities across the state and the country. While paraquat continues to be used in the United States, as was just mentioned, more than 70 countries, including the European Union, Brazil, and Germany, have banned the use of paraquat. Many of these countries, including China, manufacture paraquat and export it to the United States for use, all while banning it for use in its own backyard, revealing a stark reality that foreign governments protect their citizens from paraquat while profiting from its use here in the United States. In Vermont, more than 2,600 people are currently living with Parkinson's. Those direct and indirect costs, such as lost productivity, caregiving, disability, household expenses, are estimated to cost more than $120 million per year. An increase in Parkinson's prevalence represents a significant public health and economic risk to the state. Failure to curb known environmental risk factors of Parkinson's will only allow for further exposure and, down the line, an increased number of people inflicted with this disease. With this bipartisan legislation, Vermont can lead on this issue of environmental risk factors and Parkinson's disease. The scientific evidence is strong and the risks are well documented, while the human cost of inaction continues to grow. So on behalf of the Michael J. Fox Foundation and the resilient community we are very proud to work with, I urge members of this committee to support this bill and further safeguard the health of Vermonters. But I'm very happy to be with you all this morning and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Zach, what other chemicals are on your list?
None. I can say that fully. I know that Dr. Boyd mentioned earlier, in terms of the science and research, we are the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. We take that last word incredibly seriously, and it has taken us years to get to this point where we can definitively stand behind the research that is available linking paraquat exposure to Parkinson's disease. It is the only chemical that we are asking states currently. I know a map was shared earlier of other states that are considering bans. It is the only one that we have our name behind. And that is because the decades of research has gotten us to this point. If that science was not clear enough, we would not have our name behind it. So paraquat truly is the chemical that we are focused on because we believe, yes, are there other chemicals and exposures out there that could lead to Parkinson's or an increased risk? Possibly. Is the science there to back it up? No. But with paraquat, this has been decades and decades in the making, and that's why we're focused on it in states today.
What other states, have a ban on paraquat?
Currently, not one state has a full ban. California, which I know has been mentioned a few times this morning, did have a bill about a year or two ago where they debated a ban. The bill that was actually passed, their Department of Environmental Regulatory Protection will reevaluate the use of paraquat by 2029. That is the legislation that was actually passed. And this is the year where we are really talking with lawmakers in multiple states about the need for a ban. And that's why over half a dozen states are currently considering these bills.
Zach, you've listened to this morning's testimony from small orchards and small and such a limited use and the effect that it may have on neighbors, and that almost seems literally not going to happen because of the limited use. And we're out in California. I'm sure the uses were in the 20, 30 gallon point rather than, a pint like we use here. And there's, the farmers are saying this is a tool that's very valuable for us and we use a limited amount. Given my position, I'm trying to weigh decision. It doesn't sound like here in Vermont, it's such a small limited use that for what the positive effect it's having for our growers, and we can't, and they're so far away from their neighbors. What would go through your mind if you had to sit where I am and make that decision that, yeah, paraquat is no way around it. From making it to applying it, it's a very hazardous, dangerous chemical, but it has a very minor use here in Vermont that probably really the effect on fellow humans is negatable, So sit in my spot. But tell me what you might noodle through.
Absolutely. Senator, I appreciate the question. It's a very important one. We heard when the bill was in the House, we heard from orchardists, people working in agriculture, the same concerns. And I sympathize with them because that conversation about tools in the toolbox makes perfect sense. And I understand that it is important for their bottom line and also just the work that they do that is incredibly important. What I would say is a few things. Because this is so toxic, obviously a lot of the conversation today has been around farm workers and their potential exposures. Yes, the many steps that are taken, the regulations that are in place from the federal government of how to handle this are in place for a reason. But some of that science is also showing that no matter how protected you are, no matter how much you try, because paraquat is truly, I think this was mentioned earlier, not just one of, possibly the most toxic chemical that we can talk about, that exposure over time will still increase the risk that is posed to those very farm workers that are concerned about it being removed from their toolbox. And that is where the conversation becomes, how do we bridge concerns about public health and exposure for these folks over time, and also their economic bottom line? And I think that that's where you find in the current form of the bill, a compromise that has been reached where there will be several years of a phase out. And of course, I appreciate that folks, I know there was a strawberry farmer, I believe, who was here earlier. That's how the conversation developed in the House. Orchardists came forward and said, hey, we use this. This is how, let's talk about this. And that's why I think the language talking about this phase out of nearly 5 years, that's a lot of time to look at the alternatives that do exist, how, test them out, see how that could change their economic bottom line, because there are other alternatives out there that other countries do use and still are able to be very successful in their crop production. The same crops that are produced here, whether it's strawberries, whether it's the orchardists. So that's a very important piece of this conversation. I think it is that age-old question of balancing. Yes, we know that things can be harmful and toxic for folks, but also there is a use. Paraquat is very good at what it does. It kills weeds very effectively, but it also poses an incredibly dangerous risk to the folks handling it. So I think that finding that balance and measuring how folks can move away from the use of paraquat, even in its limited capacity here in Vermont, will still pay dividends down the line when those very farm workers could potentially not develop the kind of illnesses and diseases that have been linked to the use of this chemical.
Does Poland ban it as well, correct? Is that good?
Poland, you said?
Yes.
I would have to triple check, but it may be one of those 70+ countries.
Okay. I'll Google it right now while I'm talking.
Zach, I have a question. Given the fact from what we just heard from Mr. Dwinell, and I think Dr. Boyd referenced it a little bit, that ingestion seems to be the worst thing you could possibly do. I guess I'm at a loss to, and I'll read the footnotes that you have in your report here. How is it that people that live near it, since we don't have aerial spray anywhere in the state, how is it that those people have a higher incidence of contracting Parkinson's and it's somehow attributed to paraquat use? In other words, if they're not drinking it or putting it inside their body, I'm at a loss to figure that out, I guess.
No, that's a great question. I appreciate it, Senator. I think that just to go on what other folks said earlier, yes, there is no aerosol spraying of paraquat. That is banned on the federal level as well, because that would wreak havoc in terms of its toxicity. I would rely on some of those studies that are going to be cited in the materials that I shared, but also can certainly follow up with the committee in terms of the specifics about what those studies have looked into of why that is that folks, even just living near some of these application sites, even if it isn't, going to water, even if it isn't in the air, how is that still increasing the likelihood? I think the fact that there are studies that are still showing that kind of speaks to what we've seen over time with paraquat and this discussion about its toxicity, is that it has really evolved very much over time. And it seems that every time there's updated, regulations or research, it just gets smaller and smaller in its available use because of its toxicity. And I can say that in terms of the federal government and their regulations, because some folks have said, why not wait until the EPA may take that step eventually? And what I would say to that is we can go back just as recently as 2021, where they, again, limited the use of paraquat, took it away from public-facing areas such as playgrounds and golf courses. And the reasoning there is, they don't want folks who are near an area where this is sprayed, or excuse me, where it is used and applicated, because it is so toxic. So again, it goes back to that question where, are there enough ways that these farm workers and folks who are as directly involved in the application of paraquat, are there enough ways that they can truly be protected? Or is that going to be another instance where a couple more years down the line, when the EPA asks these manufacturers for more studies, as this piecemeal approach where they continue to delay, and then these studies come back and say, actually, this is more dangerous than we thought 5 years ago. And it goes back to even the 70s when we banned DDT. It was the same thing then. The science wasn't definitive that there was a causal link between DDT and all these hosts of harmful, human disease. But the EPA still banned it. And then 8 years down the line, when the studies were there to really prove that that was the right decision, then they were able to say, well, good thing we banned it when we did. And we're seeing a bit of the reverse with paraquat right now, where the science is incredibly clear, but the regulatory action, keeps getting kicked down the line, and the use becomes more and more limited. But we do believe it's going to get to that day where folks realize this is as toxic as it is. There is no right way to handle it to keep folks safe.
Okay, I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Poland did July 2007. So
I would support Poland's position there.
well, their environment is close to us. I'm wondering if it's possible that we reach out to their agricultural ministry and see if we could get what they use for substitutes over paraquat. So
yes, and I will just add quickly on that I think that, again, going to what this legislation specifically calls for in terms of, one, the study that the department would do, but also the phase out in terms of the years available, gives that ample time for folks to look at not only the alternatives that exist, but the best and most effective alternatives that will really not change, their daily procedures in agriculture, or most importantly, their bottom line, and which one can fill that role the best.
Thanks a lot.
thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you in, and we're going to be talking about next week, so you're more than welcome to hang around at that point in time.
Thank you all. Much appreciate the time.
Committee, very good work today. Sorry for no break on that. I just thought it was important to get to our list of where we were.
We don't got through it.
Good job of trying to figure this out. Where we have I think we still have a bit of ways to go. So thank you for a strong week. I hope Easter or whatever that you do, that's a good time. And see you again next week. So thank you.